Good evening. Welcome to the January 16th, 2016, or 2018, pardon me, meeting of the ETHS Board of Education. Yeah, right, take it back a couple of years. Could I have a roll call, please?
Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here, thank you. So the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes of the December 11th, 2017 regular meeting. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, so next item is written communication. Do we have any written communication, Dr. Bavis?
We have no written communication at this time.
All right, great. So we are already at our information items. The first item is very exciting, popular annual financial report award for 2016, and I did say it right this time. The Government Finance Officers Association. Who's leading this, Dr. Witherspoon?
Thank you, President Williams. This is starting to become a habit for us to take a little time out of board meetings to acknowledge financial recognitions and awards. I'm going to ask Mary Brodino, our Chief Financial Officer, to come up and join me, because this is just a lot of fun to be able to present these. We have, you recall, just a meeting or so ago that we were doing some awards, and if you think, well, this sounds like it's a repeat, apparently they just keep telling us the same thing over. No, these are new awards. So I want to take a minute and recognize both of them. The first one is the GFOA Popular Annual Financial Report Award. That's the Government Finance Officers Association, and they have awarded Evanston Township High School District 202 their award for outstanding achievement in the popular annual financial reporting. In order to receive this award, an entity must produce a high-quality popular annual financial report. I know that's a strange name, but that is actually the official name. So when people get this in the mail and they see that on the cover, it's like, can't they come up with a better title? Well, actually, this is an official financial nomenclature so that the quality of a popular annual financial report that specifically is designed to make readily accessible and easily understandable information to the general public that would be interested in the organization and our public finance. We have won this award now 5 years in a row, which isn't bad since we first published our first popular annual financial report 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
We were awarded then. We've won the award again this year. Mary's going to, in a next agenda item, talk briefly about the report to explain it just a little bit more. But Mary, congratulations. This is obviously a big accomplishment, something the district only started doing 5 years ago, and we've won an award every year for our report. Congratulations. Now, I better talk faster because you can't imagine what these things weigh. So I won't make you stand there holding it too long. But the other award is the GFOA Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for FY16. This would be the Government Finance Officers Association that has awarded Evanston Township High School District 202 the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for having having met. I don't have my reading glasses on. I think I better just do this. I was trying to fake it so that I wouldn't have to acknowledge this, everybody, but here I go. Much better. For having met or exceeded the program's high standards for financial reporting and accountability. I want you to listen carefully to this. So 22 school districts out of over 840 school districts in Illinois have received this award And this would be for 2015, I believe.
16.
Okay, that's a misprint. I actually am reading it. For 2016.
Oh, the numbers are for 2015 because the
Then
numbers
it is,
for
right.
2016 are.
So it is our financial reporting of 2015.
The statistics. are
That
for
works.
2015.
So get this, out of over 800 Illinois school districts, 22 have achieved this Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. Nationwide, 553 school districts across the country have won it. There are over 14,000 school districts in this country. Wow. And we're one of the 553 to have earned this award. Congratulations for excellence in financial reporting. And if I can lift it once, I'm going to let you
All right.
handle it.
I'll have one for each hand.
And that concludes my report.
Good job.
Congratulations. Wow. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Mary, for leading such a great team effort, I'm sure. Yes, very impressive. Thank you. And Dr. Witherspoon is right. We don't take these for granted. So I always appreciate when you give those numbers so we can kind of get a sense of how big this is. Okay, and so next up is the
Yes.
great Mary Rodino.
And Mary has just a few slides to quickly review and explain this popular annual financial report.
Thank you again for the applause. And just to, it gets a little confusing sometimes with the dates, so just to kind of go over the dates and the years of the reports. In December, the board approved our comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal 17, and that's ending June 30th. And so tonight we're looking at the popular annual financial report, which is a much more brief version, a lot easier to read, and just about anyone can understand it. So the awards that we receive are always in arrears, and so the awards that we had tonight were for the 2016 popular annual financial, as Eric said, and then the 2016 comprehensive annual, which was a year ago, December. The statistic numbers that Eric read were from 2015 because it takes them a little while to compile how many districts won it nationally and state. So sorry if the dates were a little confusing there. So I just have a few slides. I think most of you are familiar with this, but this is our most recent, our newest financial report that, as Eric said, we started 5 years ago. And we do distribute this to all of the households within our district boundaries, so Evanston and a portion of Skokie. And it's a nice, glossy, easy-to-read report that we think a lot of people can read and do appreciate the brevity. You all know how long my other reports are. So technically, it's a document intended to convey the results of a government's operations to those stakeholders of the government that do not necessarily have a background in public finance, which is why it has the term popular in the title. It's basically an overview of financial and other types of highlights from the district's year. It includes statistics like enrollment numbers, items like goals, budget strategy, and some highlights of our revenue and expenses, and then also some highlights of events and awards from the past year. And I think most of you know Kathy Meals, who used to work here. She does help us work on this, and because she also works on the alumni newsletter, she's really in tune with what things have happened over the course of the year, so she's a great resource when it comes to putting some of those accolades together. So the popular annual financial report, or PAFR, summarizes the CAFR, which is that comprehensive report, in an easy-to-read format. It discusses some of our budget challenges and some of the outside threats, like things that are going on at the state and even federal level. So within the document, there is a section called Revenue Highlights, or Where Does the Money Come From? And it talks about our main funding sources, which includes a brief explanation of property taxes, and then some of our most important revenues like general state aid and some of the federal and then categorical aids, such as special education. To go along with that, we also have expense highlights, or where does the money go? And this section really highlights the main sources of how we spend our money, which, as we all know, is generally mostly in salaries and benefits. And the section also summarizes other categories such as purchase services, supplies, materials, capital, and tuition. And that means tuition to off-campus placements. So in the highlights section this year, I just wanted to pick out a few of the things that were mentioned as highlights. ETHS was named one of America's most challenging high schools. ACT scores were the highest since 1973. We also talked about our big renovation of our ceramic studio, the declaration of ETHS as a safe haven, our new virtual tour software, and also had a picture of and talked about our newest geometry and construction house. And then there were smaller articles on book exchanges, time capsules, and various other kudos. And interestingly, I got an email today that Marion Rosen in the library, in Central Library, said that several people had already come up to her and talked about how they appreciated the book exchanges and they had read it within this document. So that was nice. And that's it. I just wanted to give you a brief run through, especially for the board members who maybe weren't as familiar with the document, and then see if you had any questions. It's the only brief thing we create in my department. So enjoy it, because this is as short as it gets.
That was good.
Thank you, Mary.
Questions? No one has questions?
I just have really quick, I just want to say two things. One, it's excellent. It is clear, easy to read, and transparent and brief, and so I really appreciate that. Secondly, I want to just, at every opportunity, to be able to say that the information in it is so sound, and our district is in such a great position, and that has a lot to do with your leadership and the whole school and the management of the school, and we can't say that enough, because you could go to throw a coin and hit another school district, and they're not reporting like this. A, they're not being this transparent, and B, they don't have the positive story to tell. So thank you to you and to everyone who makes that possible.
Thank you. And I want you to know that, as you said, Pat, about not taking the awards, for granted,
Yes.
we don't take that situation for granted either. And just like with quality of reporting, making sure that we make good decisions is an ongoing process, and it's not something that we take lightly. Oh, we had a good year and it was a little unexpected, and so we can kind of sit back and breathe. We really don't look at it that way, and I think that's part of being in Illinois, because you just don't know when you don't know when other things can be pulled out from under you. So we don't take it lightly. So thank you.
All right.
Amen.
Thank you, Mary. Wonderful. All right. So next up on our agenda is our report on school-based healthcare center.
Well, here we go again, and
Yes.
our annual report, Dr. Holland is coming forward, and Joyce Sia, our lead nurse, registered nurse, is coming forward, and great folks to work with. Joyce is in the school every day. Dr. Holland is here tons, and we look forward to hearing this year's report.
Well, thanks for having us back. In February, we will be starting our 22nd year of operation, so that's kind of exciting.
Wow.
Seen a few generations come through, so that's kind of fun. Do you want to advance our slides? Okay, so I think the slides are going to be pretty familiar. This is just our staff. I think most of you know a lot of our staff is myself, Kathy Swartout, Julie Russell, and our secretary, Shirley Henry, have been here for the duration, so we're the old timers, and everybody else, like Joyce, is younger and more energetic and enthusiastic. It's all good. We have a pretty stable staff made up of myself, a couple other doctors from the community, some nurse practitioners, and our other support staff, so I'll let you. So everybody who enrolls in the high school is eligible for our services. Of the 3,000 plus students in the high school, we usually have about 1,800 enrolled at any one time. And then we also provide some services, as you all know, to District 65, very limited in scope, really funded by a small grant from the state. So we do some evaluations just for specific things like hearing tests and some school entry physicals and referrals for specialty care. But that's a pretty small piece of what we do. As always, you need to have your parents sign on if you're under 18 to come in and see us. If you're over 18, if you're 18 or over, you can come and see us on your own. There's some Illinois laws that allow you to access our services around issues around mental health and sexually transmitted infections, reproductive health issues, that kids can come in under 18 on their own and consent for a limited number of services if they apply just to these issues. So we see a few kids under that as well. Go ahead. This kind of gives you a breakdown, not dramatically different from the past. Everybody always asks about our uninsured number, which always seems ridiculously high, given that we live in a state where most kids should be enrolled in all kids. We get a lot of kids that come in every year who either new to Illinois, new to the United States, eligible for Medicaid but haven't been signed up, et cetera, et cetera. So we work during the year to get those kids enrolled. So that number really just represents people when they're walking in the door for their first visit, and it decreases significantly during the year. But there's still some people that are not insured, a very small number, fortunately. And I think everybody knows what we do. We do healthcare. You know, we do well visits and sick visits. We see kids for injuries. We see kids for illnesses. We see kids for chronic diseases and short-term diseases. We do a lot of reproductive health care, a lot of mental health services. We still have the services of our acupuncturist who comes once a week. Is funded by a grant from the Integrated Medicine Department at North Shore and helps kids with some chronic issues and chronic diseases, which is a very cool thing. And then the Sports Medicine Department at North Shore comes into the health center once or twice a week to see athletes who've been injured in practice or have concussions or other things. So we've been very happy that we've been able to kind of accommodate them on site and provide some services for them. I think I kind of, went over a lot of this. We do have about 3,000 plus clinical encounters a year, which means we're seeing 3,000 not different students. A lot of students replicate visits, but it's a lot of visits where people are coming in and we're seeing them for all sorts of visits, all sorts of reasons like we did before. And again, a small section, these are District 65 students, but that's a pretty minor piece. Anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me. I'll certainly take them at the end. The next couple slides are just to give you an idea of what we do in the course of the year. We do 300 or 400 routine physicals and sports physicals. We do a lot of contraception. We give out a lot of vaccines, do a lot of counseling, mental health visits. The next slide throws up just lots of some highlights of other things we do, just to give you an idea of what we're seeing. We're seeing illnesses. We have a good, Lynn Shahab, one of our doctors, runs our obesity program, and she works hard at that. So we see kids for injuries and asthma and acne and unfortunately a fair amount of chlamydia and STD screening. So that just gives you an idea of like the kinds of things we'll see in a year. And then feel free to interrupt me with some of this stuff. We do try and do a lot of outreach to the community as well. So we participate in the health education in the freshman PE classes and the sophomore wellness classes, also partnering with YOU. There's a lot of outreach to student and parent organizations. We participate in programs for parents of incoming students. I think you're doing that tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night.
Course
selection.
Just to let them know who we are and our services and what they can do. We do a lot of in-services to kind of keep ourselves up to date. As I mentioned before, we have our weight management program. We do a week every year in conjunction with the health department where kids can get tested, just walk in, get tested for STIs, which is a really great service. We do faculty flu shots, which ETHS now underwrites the cost for, which is great because once that happened, we doubled the number of flu vaccines we gave out per year. And I think, certainly if 120 people are getting vaccinated, that means hopefully a lot fewer staff getting flu during the season, which is now, and missing days and all those other things that go along with that. So I think is that our last slide? I think that's our last slide. That's our last slide.
That's it.
We try and keep it short, keep it brief. As I said, we kind of do the same thing year in, year out. We provide health care, we take care of kids. Few new things happen every year, a few old things get retired, but we're happy to be here and happy to provide services, so happy to take any questions as well.
I just want to say thanks very much. I'm, I think the board representative, I don't know if there's somebody else on the board who's on the Health Center Advisory Committee or whatever we call it, which also includes members of the community and even students. We had a really nice, at least one student, I think, at our meeting this fall, and it's really nice to go to that annual meeting to just hear what's going on and get a little input from whoever manages to be there, and it's usually a pretty good crowd. I mean, I think there were at least 15 people there that meeting, so thanks very much.
Thank you for coming. We always appreciate more input. Sometimes when you've been doing something for 20 years in a row, you kind of feel like it's good to have some fresh ideas and faces, and so we always appreciate people's input.
I think especially having the student there who came from a class we have on
Health
related.
services.
Yeah, what was it?
Health services is the name of the department. I don't know the name of the exact class,
But
but
it's,
Ms.
the
Hill.
idea is to explore health careers, right? Which is kind of nice.
So speaking of which, and we forgot to list that up there, this year we started a youth advisory board
No, we
of
didn't.
about,
I just
is it up there?
Student advisory board. Oh my God. Sorry, I forgot to mention it. That's Joyce's baby, so I'll defer.
That's up there, so that started this year. We've got about 10 very passionate students, so that's good.
Great. Pat?
Yes, thank you. This is really helpful and really great work. I'm just wondering if there's anything you're either surprised that you say you kind of do the same thing for 20 years, but are there any surprises or any needs that maybe either of the kids or of your center that you feel are on the horizon, if not among you now?
There's certain areas that we always have need in, and mental health is a big piece of that. We have a social worker, she does a lot of triage, we work with the school social workers, but, as is true in the community of Evanston and all of Illinois, and in fact, all the United States, the need for child and adolescent psychiatry is huge. And so even kids who have, quote-unquote, good insurance, which I'm not sure that exists anymore, but those kids have better access. Kids who have limited resources with no insurance or on Medicaid have a really tough time accessing psychiatry. So that's always a problem, and that's always a number one priority for us. It's just really hard for anybody to get access, and if you are either uninsured or you have a very restrictive HMO or you're in the state's Medicaid plan, it's just even harder for those kids. So that's always an ongoing need. It always amazes me that we still have kids that can't get insurance. That are either kids whose parents have immigrated who may not meet eligibility requirements for state and federal insurance, or kids whose parents we just can't connect with enough to get them in and really just get the kids on their insurance. So those are, or get the kids to the appropriate provider. Parents who don't have the resources, we do as much as we can to support them and to try and get kids places. And a lot of times, I have an incredible staff, and they go above and beyond and reach out and get the parent in with a cab and get the parent and the kid together in a cab to get them to the doctor's appointments. I mean, it's amazing how much support some kids and some families need just to access basic specialty services. I mean, we do primary care. So it's those kinds of issues that I think year in and year out really are the kinds of things we see. Any other comments you want to make about that?
Even with all that, as much as, even if we are able to get a student insurance, we'll find 2-3 months later, because of the state of Medicaid, that they'll be booted from that plan, and then we'll have to start the whole process over.
Yeah, the state of Medicaid.
It's difficult. It's really difficult to get some of these.
The state of Medicaid in Illinois is really tough to deal with. Everybody is getting put into a managed care plan, and there's 6 or 7 kind of left after the last few years. And lots of plans have different groups of specialists. So we can see them. We have a bit of a carve out from the state, but just because I can see them, if the kid needs a cardiologist, I can't necessarily refer a kid to a cardiologist because I'm not a person in that plan. So then somehow we have to explain to the student that they have to figure out who their primary health care provider is, go to that person at some location that they've never been to and they don't know where it is, and the parent has to take off work, and they may or may not be able to do that. And then they have to get a referral and then go to some other specialist. I mean, like I said, there's so many burdens on people being able to use the insurance they have. And Medicaid just makes it so difficult. With this idea of getting people into managed care to save money, it really limits a lot of access that kids have. And we see this not only with Medicaid, but also with families that have really tight and restrictive private HMO plans or those kinds of things. It's just hard to get kids sometimes to the services that in theory their insurance covers, but they may cover 2 specialists in the area and one is 15 miles away and they're only open during, 8 to 5. It's getting people access continues to be a big problem.
You had a slide earlier, one of the first slides you had, these are students who come into school not insured?
Yeah.
Is this the group you're?
Yeah, some of them.
Yeah.
Also the
Even the
So-
students coming in with Medicaid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That group of kids, a lot of that 25% gets insured over the course of the year.
Right.
I mean, we get them, we try and we have our social worker meet with them to see if they're eligible for certain federal or state plans, and then, you know, sometimes those kids are actually eligible under their parents' plan. I mean, we just try and so that number is 25% when they walk in the door.
Right.
It's not 25% at the end of the year. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's probably half
yeah,
that.
Thanks for putting it up. I
Yeah.
was trying to take it in.
Yeah. And, you know, again, we don't since we don't charge students for much of anything other than a small fee for physicals and a small fee for immunization services, we don't reassess their insurance status during the course of the year if they come back in for several things, since we're not charging them anyway, so we don't necessarily know over the course of the year. We know we get a lot of them insurance, we know we get a lot of them on plans, but I couldn't tell you what the number is at the end of the year.
That would be good, some good data to get, though.
Yeah, if we could figure out how to do
Get on
that.
I just have a quick comment. I just have a quick comment. Just listening to this backdrop helps me appreciate this even more. You know, because just looking at this, it's like, oh, this is great, this is nice, this is wonderful, this is ETHS, right? But listening to what you're having to deal with and just the complexity of who we are as a community and as a high school helps me to appreciate this even more than you presenting the slides. So just thank you for all that and everything that you're doing and trying to help our kids gain access and be well, because it's not easy, you know, it's not easy. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I just want to, first of all, give another shout out to Julie, to you, Dr. Holland, and Joyce, and to your whole staff. Being here in the school every day and around the students, I know how important the work you do and the medical care that you provide is for the students. I also want to give a shout out to North Shore University Health System. The hospital was under different ownership when this partnership started.
Well, a different
22
name,
years ago.
maybe. We changed the name a few times.
And when North Shore took over the hospital, they you know, obviously had to examine what they might be committed to, and they made a decision to continue to place a high value on this and to continue this commitment. I was talking about how rare these awards are. School-based health clinics are rare.
Right.
There are very few schools, public or private, in this country that actually have an on-site, all day, every day of the school year, school-based health clinic. This is a remarkable model. We may not be the only ones, but this is not a very common model, and I know you have visitors every year come from other places to look at it, hoping that maybe they could start something like it. So I just want to give a shout out to you and the hospital in North Shore. It's remarkable, and I couldn't imagine, only because we're so blessed to have it, what would our students do without it? So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah.
You know, we have three main partners. We have the high school, North Shore University Health System, and the health department, the City of Evanston Health Department, and they've kind of been partners from the beginning, and so it's really vital to our services and what we can provide. And then the state of Illinois also provides probably about, what do you think, 25 to 30% of our funding in something along those lines. You know, we have a grant that we kind of started with from the state of Illinois, and that's continued every year. So it really allows us to do the work we do. It allows us to see students for the most part free of charge and charge minimally for our services. So we couldn't do it without you and without your support, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Great.
Wonderful. Okay, so our next item is our first reading of the press policy issue number 96. Right?
Yep. So the policy committee met on January 9th to review the most recent policy update. The policy update is dated October, but wasn't released to us until right before winter break. So don't be misled by the October headline.
Right.
It's press issue 96. The policy committee also reviewed 4120 operational services food service. It was cleanup from about 2 years ago. And we also updated the board member compensation expenses Exhibit 1, E1 and E2. Thanks to Lisa working on that, implementing those reimbursement forms and revising them. In addition, the committee reviewed policy 7315 and compared it to the Speech Rights Journalists Act, on which it's based, and suggested some changes be integrated into the policy. The committee drafted questions that went to our attorney. Our attorneys have reviewed the policy and those questions and are drafting an updated, integrating some language from the Journalism Act into the policy so that we can then look at that at the next policy committee so we can have a draft of that to review. And then should they recommend it come before the board, then we'll do that the next cycle.
All right, great. Any questions?
I had a question about that.
Jonathan?
So I did bring this to the policy committee and about the Student Journalist Act and our policy, and I'm glad to see we're making progress with that. My only concern is that the policy committee, in my experience, meets like every 3, 4, 5 months. And I would hate to see, I really don't think the policy currently complies with the state law, and I would really like to see us get the update sooner. And if the attorneys have done their work, I wonder if they could they bring it directly back to the board at our next meeting rather than waiting several months for a policy committee meeting?
So first off, I would suggest that the current policy that we have in place is the policy we're provided by Press, which pretty much every school that subscribes to the Press has that policy. So the idea then that all schools that subscribe to that policy would be in violation of the law, I mean, that's a question for the lawyers.
Right.
I didn't ask that question. I could ask that question as a follow-up, though. Is our current policy in violation of the law? That wasn't the question that was asked to go to the attorneys, but I'll ask that question.
Well, no, I mean, there are provisions in the law that are not in our policy about how you handle, when you want to censor content of a student newspaper, what the steps you have to go through, and they're in the law, and they're not in the policy. Now, whether that makes it in violation of the law depends on how it's applied, I suppose. But I guess my real question here is about timing. Can we either have a special meeting of the policy committee to deal with this? Because as I say, we often don't get these press updates for, 4 or 5 months at a time. And I'd hate for us to have to wait that long.
They're typically updated quarterly.
Quarterly?
Yeah.
So is there any way for us to find out when the next press update will be? I don't know. I know that this one came out in October.
Yeah,
Well, this is from October, so if it's
Well,
quarterly.
why don't we, I mean, so if we get an update before we get the draft from our lawyers, then we can include it in our regular policy committee meeting. If we get the draft from the lawyers, I assume it's not going to take them more than a week or 2 to draft a less than one-page policy.
They already have done it.
Right.
They haven't done it yet. I don't have.
Okay.
I have
So
answers to the questions. don't
I
have
assume
time.
it would take them a week or 2 to do it, and if we haven't gotten a press update by then we can either call a special committee of the policy, special meeting of the policy committee, or bring it straight to the next board meeting.
Well, I would hate to do something different than our process. So if we need to, I think at that point we would look to see, can we contact our press to find out?
We can contact
timing?
press, see what their timeline is.
Yeah, I think
The issue is,
we do that and
Right.
make a decision.
I mean, the issue with that is that there is an issue where it says October, but we don't get it until December. I mean, that's one of I don't know how accurate their timeline is, but I'm happy to put in a call to them.
Yeah, why don't we start
Get a
there
timeline.
and then see what we've got and with the goal to move it forward. Okay, other comments? Okay, great. All right, we are at comments from the public.
Yes, we have 4 people signed up for public comment.
Okay.
This is just a reminder, public comment is 3 minutes. I get the unenviable task of timing it. I will give everyone a warning when they have 30 seconds left, so that gives you some time to kind of finish your thoughts. I'll call time, the phone will go off. It'll be a little awkward as I fumble to turn it off. Don't take it personally, but it's just the way I handle technology. And then I'll ask you to finish your sentence. Okay? The first person up is Darlene Cannon, and we do our public comment from the podium.
Good evening. I'm an ETHS graduate, a native Evastonian. My son is a graduate from here. And I come as a representative tonight from the Pittner Block Club. We cover Pittner, Lake Street, Hartree. And I come tonight to discuss the ETHS off-campus school. The off-campus school was a violation of the Open Meetings Act, 634-6, by not notifying the residents within 500 feet. Zoning changes are serious, long-lasting changes. That is why there are public hearings for those. We didn't get a public hearing on the text amendment. We deserve one by right that other neighborhoods in Evanston are afforded. We are concerned about the long-term deep ratifications of the text amendment. We do realize that the alderman failed to admit to the residents that he recommended the text amendment for ETHS. And according to Mary Redino, ETHS has been working on this since August, yet the residents didn't find out about it until December. And we found out last week that ETHS has already secured a tentative lease agreement. We just want to know where was the transparency for the taxpayers in the second ward. And we feel that ETHS needs to rectify this situation. Constantly hearing that ETHS prides itself on diversity and inclusion. Then why was a black neighborhood chosen to place the off-campus school? The main thing that I heard is that it was in close proximity to the school, and there was no thought given to that you're going to further marginalize an already marginalized neighborhood. And that's it.
Thank you. Next up is Priscilla Giles. Okay. Next up is Tricia Connolly.
Good evening. As a former resident of the 2nd Ward and a current resident of the 4th Ward, I would like to request that ETHS stand by the principle of being equitable and step back from the alternative high school until 2nd Ward residents have been given due process by receiving a formal notice of a public hearing in regard to a zoning amendment. I am concerned that our neighbors in the 2nd Ward were not afforded equal treatment in this situation, and this needs to be rectified on behalf of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire Kelly is next.
Claire Kelly, longtime Evanston resident, parent, teacher, and I'm also here this evening out of concern about equity and transparency with regard to the process surrounding the ETHS proposal to set up off-campus alternative school. The residents surrounding the designated site at the Hartree and Dempster were never notified in any way of a public hearing for a zoning text amendment change, which is required for this in order to move forward with a special use application. As per the zoning code 6346. As Darlene mentioned, zoning changes are serious changes, and that's why we do have public hearings. As a school that I believe prides itself in putting concerns for equity and inclusion at the forefront of our mission, it really behooves us at this point now to rectify this situation out of respect and out of concern for equity. I think the only way that this can happen is to ask that this be rescinded and that we proceed in a proper way and not just brush over it and say what's done is done and move forward. It's really important that we take a stance as a school that for these neighbors that would be the host neighbors for this school that we'd like to place in the 2nd Ward. So again, I ask that we rectify that we take the lead in rectifying this situation, this egregious error that took place. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Giles?
I just want to say that I am proud of the report that was given, as I am probably a fourth or fifth generation of Evanston students here. But I'm wondering now, with what you're doing, how this is going to affect taxpayers. That's my question, so I don't know if this is something that is going to be answered, but that's my main question. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes public comment for this evening.
Okay.
Board, if I could just add one moment of clarity.
All right.
The city handles zoning. We are only an applicant, and we only do whatever the city asks of us in the process. And the city attorneys and the city staff are very accomplished and accustomed with that, and they know what the right, the proper process is. Even when there's a city zoning hearing, the applicant doesn't send out the notice, the city sends out the notice. So I just wanted to point out that to our knowledge, we have subscribed 100% to what's been asked of us. We've been meticulous in it. The city has followed their process, and while I just am not the expert to talk about the particulars of something, a process like that, I just want to point out that a zoning matter comes before the city. An applicant makes application. Everything about the running of the process is in the hands of the city.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, so moving on, we are at FOIA, item number 12. Dr. Davis?
Yes, we have. Yes, we've received FOIAs from Shepherd, Johnson, Langman, Bartling, Underberg, and Meadows, and the responses are in your packet.
Great. All right, thank you.
I had a question.
Yes.
Have we received any other correspondence related to FOIA other than what's listed here since our last board meeting?
There are FOIAs in process right now from over winter break.
But no, only, so we have other requests?
Yes.
From winter break?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so we are at item number 13, board committee reports. I think we, Pat, you had something? You went to something?
Yes, so I attended the EdRed meeting last week, which Gretchen's usually the one reporting, but Mary and I were there. So Mary, I'm just going to give a couple quick things, but if you want to add anything, please do. So basically they gave us an update on federal legislation that may have some impact on our schools and as well as state legislation. And there were several things talked about, DACA, all different, the end of the individual mandate, et cetera. But one item that sort of caught my attention was, and this is in the national news too, is that if Congress doesn't extend the debt ceiling, which is pretty pro forma, except under this Congress may have some more prickliness, that $150 billion per year in cuts are automatically made. So that just trickles through the entirety of the country and would impact education funding as well. And that their next time to deal with this is the 20th of January. So hopefully they're going to do that. In terms of the state issues, I think there's more things to think about. So one was there was a SB 444 was introduced to sort of do some cleanup on the school funding reform law that was passed last year. And in that, there was an EdRed it was very interesting, is in that was the provision that essentially what they said were non-schools could get funding. So you have to be registered with ISBE, and some organizations that are not might still be eligible. So now, if I read the news right over the weekend, the governor vetoed that legislation Friday afternoon, probably while we're meeting, actually. So, but there's some interesting things to watch out for in terms of that. While the property tax freeze
Can I just add
Yeah.
maybe one point there that's
Sure.
important to know about that? That relates to the tax credit that the state has committed to $75 million to these schools that are not public schools.
Right.
In matching funds. Those funds are actually guaranteed under the new school funding law, whereas the estimated $350 million due to public schools is not guaranteed. So there could be a scenario, and it no one knows for sure how it'll play out, but it seems to be developing in this amendatory veto by the governor that, we're doing everything, the state seems to be doing things to guarantee funds to private schools, yet there is no similar guarantee or assurance for public schools. And it's really important to know and appreciate that, because it, I think, just speaks volumes about our priorities as a state. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, that's good.
we just had an EdRed conference call, agenda planning for our meeting next week, and this was front and center as a topic, and I think it's a point that needs to be reiterated as often as possible, because it's kind of gotten lost in all the talk of this funding reform.
No, thanks, Gretchen, that's good. So in terms of the property tax freeze that we heard a lot about in the news and we were worried about in the fall, there's not one particular bill that they're worried about, but there's a number of bills that are still live. So that is an issue that could come up. According to EdRed, the pension shift discussion is a little quieter at the moment, since the state is now paying Chicago's pension, but again, everything is always an option for revisiting. And then the other thing that was interesting that they're working on is TIF, or tax increment finance reform, and looking at making some adjustments there, greater clarity and transparency, and they're drafting legislation around that. So that's an issue that certainly impacts us. But Mary, please jump in.
I think you covered it all. The only thing I wanted to add to the board, which I don't think specifically came up in EdRed, but as we're thinking about a potential property tax freeze, the CPI number did come out, and it is 2.1 again. So when we talk about how Cook County taxes work, and it's a blend of one CPI and the other, I think if there is no property tax freeze, we'll be looking at a solid 2.1% increase in the future revenues, which is higher than, I think, the last 4 years at least. So I can't go back any further than that in my head for percentages, but of course, it just, the irony is when the rates start to trend up, now we're talking heavily about a property tax freeze, so.
Great. Thank you, Pat. I don't know if we have any other board committee reports. No? All right, then we are at the superintendent's report.
Yes, and I just have several things to bring to your attention and to the attention of those listening in. This week, tomorrow and Thursday night, are our course selection nights. Those are for incoming freshmen, because everybody who's here is working with their counselors on selecting courses for next year. And those are always really exciting and a very big step forward for the families and the students when they come over one of the next 2 evenings to select their courses for their first semester and actually their first year in high school. We have a college planning for juniors and their parents meeting program scheduled. That's January 24th at 7 p.m. We have details on our website, and they're available in College Services, and we're letting those juniors and their families know, so we hope we get a really good turnout for that college planning program. The Shakespeare Club, our Upstarts Crows Upstart Crows will be performing in the Little Theater on January 24th and 25th. The Wednesday, the 24th performance is at 4 and is free. And tickets can be purchased at the door on the Thursday, the 25th performance at 7 p.m. So we encourage people. That's always a really good production. Our Music Honors Recital is January 30th at 7 p.m. It is free and open to the public. Our next Family Action Network event, fan program, is with author Marley Diaz, and it will be Thursday, February 1st here at ETHS. The winter play, The Government Inspector, is going to be presented February 8th, 9th, and 10th. Curtain time for each performance is 7:30 p.m. Our annual Jazz Festival, which ETHS sponsors and is a huge event, is on Saturday, February 10th this year. And then that evening, it's a Saturday, and that evening there is a jazz concert. So we encourage people, that has a huge following, by the way, and usually there is a packed house for that Jazz Festival day and the concert. Just a couple of quick reminders. We are in finals week this week. That's why our student board member Emma Stein is not here. She's home studying for finals. Second semester begins next Monday, January 22nd, but this Friday, January 19th, am I really saying this? Summer school registration begins.
Oh, my goodness.
And that concludes my report.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So the next item, we're at action items. So the first item under action item is consideration of withdrawal of resolution regarding superintendent and board communications that was adopted December 11, 2017. So I have a few things to say about this. First of all, I want to say that today we received a letter via electronic email from the ACLU with an opinion. And I want to just really emphasize that putting this item on the agenda had nothing to do with that opinion or that letter that we received. We put this item on the agenda last week, well before the ACLU letter was received. So since we just got it this afternoon, I believe it came this afternoon, our attorneys looked at this preliminary, gave a look at it, and our attorneys stand by their opinion. They indicated that concerns raised by the ACLU is not consistent with the intent of the resolution. So prior to accepting a motion to withdraw the resolution regarding the superintendent and board communication, which the board approved on December 11th, 2017, I do want to make a few comments. Assuming a motion is made to withdraw the resolution, I intend to vote in favor of the motion. My vote, however, is made with some reservations. After the board's adoption of the resolution in December, the resolution's intent and content was misrepresented in the press and in the public dialogue. The purpose of the resolution was simply for the board to recognize its obligations pursuant to each board member's oath of office, an oath that is mandated by the school code, the board's code of conduct, and the board's policies. When board members get elected to this office, they agree to the following: recognizing that a board member has no legal authority as an individual and that decisions can be made only as a collective body by a majority vote at a public board meeting. Taking no private action that might compromise the board or administration, and respecting the confidentiality of privileged information. Taking no private action that might compromise the board or the district. Abiding by majority decision of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels. It is by following these obligations that the board operates in accordance with the law, with transparency and openness with the public, while at the same time respecting the privacy acts of students and others in the school community, and that all decisions are made by the board as a whole after public input and discussion. Despite these very close obligations to which we agree when we take on this office, as discussed at our November board meeting, one board member unilaterally, inappropriately, and in the opinion of the majority of the board, violated these obligations. As I provided in my November comments, the board member, without notifying the superintendent or the board, shared emails from the superintendent that were intended exclusively for board members. It is significant to note that while emails in question were certainly public records of the school district that would be subject to FOIA requests and released unless a FOIA exemption applied, these emails were not the individual records of board members to share as a board member personally saw fit. Nor were these emails reviewed with the board, the administration, or legal counsel prior to release to ensure that no private or privileged information was released. Again, board members have no legal authority as individuals, are to take no private action that might compromise the board, and must respect the confidentiality of privileged information. In sharing the emails from the superintendent, it is my opinion that the board member violated the oath of office, the board code of conduct, and the board policy. In addition, the board member's actions, in my opinion, compromise the cooperative working relationship between the board and the superintendent. I believe, and I think most of my fellow board members agree with me, that it is helpful when the superintendent shares certain information with the board to keep us apprised of issues facing the school district between board meetings. The information shared by the superintendent may be regarding a student, an employee, possible litigation, and other sensitive information. Many times, it is preliminary in nature and subject to fast-moving events. It is completely reasonable for the superintendent to assume that board members will treat such communications as confidential and that his emails will not be unilaterally shared with third parties without first notifying the superintendent. Again, if the superintendent's communication is subject of a FOIA, it will be appropriately processed by the school district's FOIA officer. The superintendent, however, should have confidence that when sharing sensitive information with the board, individual board members will not take it upon themselves to share the information without first notifying the superintendent. Due to the board members' inappropriate actions, we as a board felt an additional board resolution setting forth expectations that addresses how board members are to handle certain emails communication was in the best interest of the board. The resolution was never intended to avoid the school district's transparency obligations. Rather, its intent was to address how board members, and only board members, are expected to handle certain communications. And those expectations were simple. 1, consider the communication confidential. 2, if a board member wishes to share it, seek the consent of the author. And 3, If a board member does not think the author will consent and extraordinary circumstances exist, notify the author or the board attorney before sharing. Finally, the resolution contained absolutely no penalties for noncompliance. The resolution is aspirational rather than obligatory. I want to emphasize that despite the concerns raised by two of my colleagues at the last meeting, the resolution does not violate the law. We have consulted with the school district's legal counsel, and based on that consultation, we are confident that the resolution does not violate OMA or FOIA or the First Amendment rights of the public or board members. While the resolution encourages board members to not share certain communications with third parties, it in no way restrains the school district's FOIA officer from complying with FOIA requests. Board members do not process FOIA requests. FOIA officers do. Further, the resolution in no way condones or even contemplates closed board meetings. It merely provides guidance regarding how board members and just board members are to handle communications from the superintendent or the board president. One-way communication from the board president or the superintendent that are not interactive or contemporaneous do not implicate the OMA. Finally, the resolution in no way prohibits a board member from speaking out on specific topics, even if those topics are mentioned in a communication from the superintendent or the board president. Again, the resolution does not violate the law. So a reasonable question is, why should the board withdraw the resolution? As I have emphasized, I believe the resolution's intentions are well-meaning and legal. But ultimately, this board has far more important issues that it must address this coming year and cannot be hampered by this unnecessary distraction. This issue has already taken up too much of our time. In my view, the merits of the resolution are outweighed by the risk that it will continue to be misconstrued and the board and the school district will be weighed down by unnecessary distractions. Finally, the absence of consequences from the resolution arguably makes it unnecessary. If there is another breach of a board member's obligations regarding their oath, the board will not shy away from criticizing those actions. I do believe, however, that the board should continue to consider the best ways to address inappropriate board member actions, and I am hopeful that sometime soon the board will unanimously address the concerns the resolution attempted to resolve. So at this time, I will ask for a motion that the board withdraw the resolution regarding superintendent and board communications, which the board adopted December 11, 2017, and then we can open this up for discussion.
I move that the Board of Education for District 202 withdraw the resolution regarding the superintendent and board communication, which was adopted at our December 11th, 2017 meeting.
I'll second it.
Is there discussion? Pat?
Yes, I mean, I made the motion and I stand by it, but I want to emphasize the points that Pat made. I feel that there's nothing in that resolution that isn't in all of the other documents mentioned, our code of conduct, our oath of office, and I stand by that. And I think at the minimum, I would ask my colleagues to revisit all those documents and think about how we live them out. But I do think it's important, you know, I was struck at our last meeting that this issue came up right after we heard the significant increase in the number of our students seeking mental health support. And that is far more important than us arguing over how we work together. I think it's very important that we come together, work together, follow our commitments to one another so that we can address those important issues of our students, because that's why we're here. So I put up the motion, but I do so as Pat ended her comments because I think it's important for us to move on and to work together as a board. But I do encourage us all to go back to those commitments and make sure we live up to them on behalf of our students.
Yes, Jude.
I just want to say that, thank you. I believe that the intent of the resolution was well articulated. I also want to validate the concerns in light of the national political climate that is ongoing at the present time. Concerns about transparency are concerns that are true. So I do also want to validate those concerns, although that was the intent of the resolution, was well articulated, and it's mainly speaks to board confidence, working together, cohesiveness, and trust between the leader of this district and the board. And if there is no trust, then we cannot effectively run a school district. However, again, I do want to validate the concerns about transparency. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, hearing no discussion. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. The motion passed. Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the Black History Month resolution, and Mr. Laude is going to read that to us.
Whereas millions of people were taken from their homes in Africa in chains and were held in slavery. And whereas from 1619 to 1865, slavery was legal in the United States of America. And whereas 12 generations of blacks survived and lived in the United States as enslaved people with an incalculable human cost that continues to impact our society and culture. Whereas, on the eve of the American Civil War, approximately 4 million enslaved African Americans lived in the southern region of the United States of America, and these enslaved people were the descendants of 12 to 13 million African forebears, ripped from their homes and forcibly transported to the Americas in a massive slave trade dating from the 1400s. Whereas this forced migration is one of the greatest human tragedies in the history of the world. Whereas the celebration of Black History Month began in February 1926 with the vision of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a noted historian committed to encouraging all people to learn about the contributions of outstanding African Americans. Whereas the students and staff of Evanston Township High School must continue to learn about and be mindful of African Americans on a national and local level who have worked to serve the public good. Whereas the ETHS community should welcome and learn from all people of color to support the destruction of beliefs and practices that racially segregate and hinder students from believing that the American dream is for everyone. Whereas the ETHS community should also continually dedicate itself to the principle of equal justice for all people, remain eternally vigilant against the acts of racism and bigotry, and continue to be a leader in empowering all students through education. Therefore, we, the District 202 School Board, proclaim that in celebration of past, present, and future exceptional African American leaders, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2018 as Black History Month at Evanston Township High School.
Thank you. Could we have a motion for approval, please?
So move.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, thank you. The next item is approval of State of Illinois co-bid for purchase of elevator at the new entrance 3. Where is that?
Move approval?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. The next item is approval of State of Illinois co-bid for purchase of 2 safety department vehicles.
So move.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. The next item is the consent agenda, which consists of the Treasurer's Report from November 2017, approval of bills, personnel agenda, appointments to staff, exempt and safety, change in status, educational overload and stipends, maternity, paternity leave, certified, resignation of support staff and coach.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And the next item on the agenda is old and new business. Do we have any old or new business that people want to bring forth? Okay, so the last item is polling of the board. Does anybody have anything you'd like to share? Anybody at all? All right, so having heard none, I declare this meeting is adjourned.